Hi, Jason. Right, so that's comfortable. ECU and Sunderland. I've been to both your institutions. Nice to meet you. I'm Alan Ritz. I don't know whether you've met me before, I'm not sure. I'm Policy Development Manager at NUS, and my job is essentially how to help the membership influence the things that NUS says and believes is the best way of putting it. If you think about deliberative democracy sort of thing, then I exist in the deliberative space itself. I don't really engage in national conference itself, other than how, as any other member policy team would. My job is everything up to national conference, and I help coordinate zone conferences and the policy development convention. See, ask me any questions. I want you to ask questions if you've got any. You know, don't it. I'm here to even about the politics. The way that'll happen is I'll go, I can't answer that question, so crack off. What we'll do over the next 30 minutes or so, we'll look at, for those new, what are zones, where they fit into ACE's work, what some of the key themes are. Well, actually, I'm going to try and go through all the key themes of all zones. And what you normally wouldn't get in the run-up, and we're trying a bit more, is to try and look at in advance some key debates that you might consider. And I've got some of the folks in the different zones coming in to just give us 5 minutes on their particular zones, and I'll cover one or two myself. Then I'll quickly do elections accountability, just to make sure people understand what the opportunities are, and depending on your like I see some of your duties as I'm in that, and obviously it's a chance to ask questions. So zones are. So I mentioned the word deliberation. Let's say years ago, we just had national conference, and a conference could be described as stake, yes or no questions, and when it still is quite bureaucratic, as most mass democratic events are. Now that comes the problem of all sorts of things around access. So we wanted to be able to stretch the conversation out across the year, so that for bigger, more nuanced issues, that the membership could have time to think about it, time to even change what the proposals were. Could we get into that space where we deliberate what's going on? Zones are the first set of events that engage in that. So you'll find conversations about the different topics, which we'll go into in a minute, and that's about the change in mind, being able to influence what actually goes to conference floor before people vote or no. It's to say that they're also organising spaces in a political and practical sense. And I guess the context of the political is that the organisers, that element of organising across a lot more strongly through the agendas. It's a chance to learn and feedback. They always have been. It's like most things, just to meet people and to be able to understand how people do different things. But also it's a chance for NUS to basically scope. If you think about this as a massive set of focus groups in one respect for some of the topics, then it's about us trying to understand whether we're barking up the right or wrong trees. The duty on zone conferences from our own sort of articles is it's about accountability as well. Accountability just resting at NC and at national conference itself. It gives like a kind of stop point where the vice presidents and president can report so far to a wider audience and take questions on it. And so the questions obviously therefore involve some agenda setting. So unions will ask questions because they want things to change in a particular way. But the overall event is about agenda setting for the year ahead up in the national conference. And I suppose it's fair to say it's meeting other students, officers and staff. When I was a staff at NSU, I used to use zone conferences with a point where I meet with my counterparts and other unions. Once again, learn from each other, all that sort of stuff, and from across membership with similar interests. So that's what zone. They sit in a broad policy cycle, whereby if I just go from the start, July we have our new teams come in, they have their elected mandates and they have the baskets from conference floor in terms of the policies that they have to deliver on and the policies that they've been asked to be voted on. Through August we deliver officer training to the membership, And some of those messages, some of the interests of the vice presidents, those kind of top concern areas, and maybe some of the reflections of the policy process start to come through, either not manifestly in the training, but certainly in the context of the training and the way that people come together and meet. Really, at September, it's the start of the year. We don't really do anything like membership policy-wise at the start of the year, other than obviously respond to things that are going on around our consultations and our lobbying duties. But really, we recognise that you are looking and listening and learning from your members. You've got a whole host of events on, and we try to support where we can. At the same time, I suppose that some conferences in October are our point where we look, listen, and learn from you. And that's when we really kick in. After zone conferences, a subset, so people who are elected to zone committees and National Executive Council, will come together at what we call the Policy Development Convention. That's actually a massive NEC in some respects, and takes everything from zone conferences. So this is what we learned, this is what the membership said, what does that mean? Which culminates in about January, February. The zone will put policy proposals to conference for the membership to amend, learn, whatever, what gets them to April, where they speak on, vote on national conference. So zones sit, as you can see, at the kind of, in some respects, they're the start of our listening exercise with the membership, in a way. If you think about it, it's a previous membership that's given the mandate in July, then this is about us going, so this is what we were told, how do these pan out? It's not too a controversial way of putting it, but I'm trying to be as possible about the way this system works and where it sits at the moment. In order to focus a bit more of the conversation with the membership about areas, we reduce the topics like any new module. If you have too many priorities, they're no longer priorities. Set of key themes, and these are essentially themes where we want to do policy development on. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're not campaigning outside of these. In fact, that'd be an entirely different thing. The key themes are about what issues do we think we need to have an in-depth conversation with the membership about, to what our positions are. So with HE, for example, we've got the marketisation of HE, FE, the area reviews of further education that are on this year, union development, we're talking about the impact of student opportunities, welfare is the welfare state, which is topical enough right now, and society and citizenship are talking about fossil fuel divestment and another theme on prisoner education. As HE hasn't come into the room yet, I'll go into the welfare state, which is the one I'm covering for Flare. I guess with the welfare state, the welfare zone will probably best be described as a welfare campaign zone, because actually, to be honest, the scale of cut and the context of welfare now, not just in the student movement within society, is such that welfare zone is much more of an organising space. It will be looking at different aspects of the welfare state, so from the NHS to fund housing, benefits broadly. When you establish beliefs around those different aspects of the welfare state, what does that mean about what you believe about entitlements or protections? And very much the debate becomes about entitlements and protections. So this idea of universality and means testing, for example. If I briefly go into it, then around benefits, clear welfare state will talk about housing benefit, care allowances, that these will intersect with parts of the student body. Disabled student allowance has been on the agenda for a couple of years. Obviously, 2 or 3 years ago, we managed to changes to that, but obviously it's going to come up again. And the kind of discussion around that area around benefits is like, if are excluded from claiming most social security benefits because they're assumed to have income, is fair. Because, for example, with carers allowance, if you are a full-time student, you can't get any carers allowance. And a more fundamental debate, to be honest, which benefits should students be entitled to? And that sense of entitlement, the universality, is probably going to be a core part of that debate. With the we're talking about prescriptions, we're talking about cuts, access to health. You know, is it just funding the NHS, or are there other things that you do? How to engage with local health authorities? There's something now to the local debate on this as well, I think, to some extent. There's a side thing that's been coming up on the GISCs lately, which is worth considering in the context of the welfare state, is about the conversations about the move, not what the assumed move of health-funded students over this, with sorts of effects. That essentially means that moving from a grant system to a loan system to, I mean, the current income of health students isn't on a par with like liberal arts and other centrally funded students. But things come together, especially if you think about junior doctors' pay. There's a big crossover with the welfare zone and society and citizenship in terms of students in society. But this is kind of coming around, and it's more about the start. It's more about if you have certain views about the welfare state, what does that mean about your views of student support and what students should be entitled to? One of the things that we toyed with in the debates in the run-up to this was around the idea of to what extent should an institution be completely responsible for a student's welfare, their well-being, and that's what might come out in this. And this one in welfare would be really housing. Now, I'm assuming I don't need to go into the inflation in student rents and stuff like that over the past 10 years. I think it doubled according to the accommodations cost. But how are there enough homes that are affordable for students? What does affordability mean for a student? How does that interact with or proposal payments? So what does a student income look like, and how do you not influence market again? The impact that might have on local communities, particularly if you think about the private rented sector, and things like that. But really, how do you stop rents from rising to even more audible levels? That's really the kind of summary of welfare zone, and the debates I think will come up there. Hopefully that's useful. I mean, join me on the couch from U zone. So I wondered whether you might be able to talk about the impact of student opportunities, mate.
Which ones have you done so far?
Just on welfare. So I did all of welfare, which is kind of like interesting. Tell us about what's the UD zone about this year then.
I'm going to pick up off our work last year on SU34, where one of the key things was that few people interact with, our stakeholders, the people who are in unions, understand very much about the purpose of students' unions, or fundamentally why we exist. And that was quite weak, rather than saying, oh, unions are very valuable, they couldn't say why. So what we're here to take a look a lot more at the students' unions, and what difference and what difference they make, and kind of off the back of that, the value of students' unions.
What do your key debates might be then in that? Because that's it, functions, I suppose. What do you reckon people might disagree about?
So if we talk about
action, laptop done. Explain what SU34 is.
SU34 was our work looking at how students' unions and the student movement has changed over the last 20 or so years, and then thinking about what that means for the next 20 years of students' unions, or that kind of time scale. There's an interesting report which I'd encourage you to read online called The Big Conversation, and Joe and potentially Jason, I can circulate that to you now, or maybe we'll make it available in some way.
I'll sort it at the end.
Okay, fantastic. Just fundamentally about the difference that we make. We can make a hell of a lot of outcomes on students' unions, but to what ends are they kind of contributing towards the society? So there's, in terms of lively debate, one which is obviously in the kind of premise of the question. So the kind of recurring thing, should SEs intended impact in mind when they're doing them, when they work? What sets them? Whose impacts are they? Whose agenda is that? And how do we make sure it reflects students, if that's indeed what we would like? And do intended impacts already, and do we talk about them? Perhaps this work might just surface kind of existing ones. That's kind of what I imagine it might be. Then there's other debate potentially around what real and genuine impact, and something that we'd be interested in, rather than all an impact, but actually is not connecting. And actually,
to what matters?
So I thought I'd do a few examples at this stage. Yeah, what matters exactly? So is increasing employability an impact? Because essentially you are not changing anything about society, but you're an individual's ability to be able to kind of assume a position within it, and then it's on someone else's agenda, and it's massively flexible and not that specific as well. Perhaps an impact might be to increase an individual's capacity to manage their own emotions. That's quite interesting, but it's fundamentally about the individual. What kind of society does that create if everyone is exceptionally competent at that? Again, so you have to break it down at some point into a place where, I think that's what I call like quark level, if you be if I get into it. Like, where do you stop? And actually, our current policy has some interesting steer on that, saying that impact on students and wider society. So something like social justice is an interesting impact because it affects students and wider society at the same time. So we might kind of stop there. Interesting debate. I can go through these quickly now. What does a good society look like? How do we make sure that our answers to that question reflect the kind of breadth of this movement? And fourth interesting debate, how do students contribute towards that kind of good society through our activities? And here it is, in student opportunities, i.e. sports societies, fundraising, media, enterprise, and also basic democratic participation. I'm going to say the word basic there because I think it helps. So what we're doing is we're limiting the scope of this discussion to something that's quite tangible, which is talking about student opportunities, because it's common amongst students' unions, it's powerful, and it's quite tangible as well. We can kind of see more stuff. For instance, what the impact towards what does training student society chairs and leadership make towards the impact that you hope to create in the world.
Do you think the impact, if you use your language, of the conference might be on students' unions, or like what can they take away from it?
Yeah, sure. I imagine I'd really like for people to see it in a different, not just see it about kind of run a hamster wheel year on year, delivering more things, or continuously looking to other students' unions to see what a student union does and then replicate that, but to kind of critically about what it is that we want to achieve and innovate around that. So I think that's where the future of the student movement will be ultimately. It's in finding new ways to kind of increase our effectiveness against the agenda that we like. And then one of the takeaways for not just how NUS adapts to acknowledge and reward impact students' unions, i.e. that kind of debate around NUS awards or quality students' unions.
Yeah,
or
do you vote on that? Either tell me.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't rub on the spot on that one.
But all works in your own students' union in terms of incentivizing progress towards your own intended impact. One of them is to have a healthy local population in your local area, while how are you encouraging your student groups to improve the health of the local area rather than just students for the sake of it because you feel they're a good idea.
So it feels like some of the stuff to take away is moving towards looking at unions missions to some extent. It's kind of going back a little bit.
Very much like that, yeah.
Okay, that's cool. What do you think NUS will get from it?
First and foremost, I think it will help inform our strategic planning for the next 6 years. That's kind of happening at the moment. But I think there's some really interesting ideas that have been thrown around, literally really early stages of it, about what the development side of NUS is, like the purpose of that might be, like how do we reflect the intended impacts from the intended impacts of our membership. That's quite interesting. And then perhaps some stuff around like how does the best national indicators do we monitor nationally to prove that we're making progress against the impacts that our members want, and create a national evidence base for the students' unions.
Cool. That sounds great.
No worries.
That should be painless.
Any questions, get in touch with me, of course.
Yeah, I'll make sure I link to the big conversation document, and if anyone's got any questions, I can pass them on to Rob anyway, so sound. So now, Vicky's here, and me and Vicky are going to talk about society and citizenship a little bit. I'm going to make the debate piece for Soc and Sit. Society or citizenship, you choose. That would be probably too trite, even for me. Where's kick off, Vicky? Do you want to tell us about the broad agenda for SOCSIT?
Yes, so basically SOCSIT will be hosting more of our zone conference taking place, and our main key themes are those of fossil fuel investment and prisoner education. However, we do have other themes around, so we will be touching on the Vice President's core areas, which include citizenship education. We're looking to further define our policy on that here at the NUS, and also looking a little bit more about campaign effectiveness. We have the Cut the Cost campaign coming up, so we'll have a little segment there that provides a bit more information and also provides an opportunity for SUs to see what they can do and actually be equipped with the skills to do and make change. So that's a general overview of what's going on at the conferences. Okay,
and I think I can talk into, please dive in. I wish that's me questions, that'd be really helpful. I'll talk into, I suppose, fossil fuel divestment a little bit, really. I suppose with fossil fuel divestment, we already have policy on divestment from fossil fuels, in fairness. That's about campaigns in Glasgow, in Oxford, and I think about 7 other institutions, or it might be 6 other institutions, who've successfully campaigned at their universities to not put their money into fossil fuels. I suppose this stuff is about renewables and stuff like that. So this is really the second step to the whole fossil fuel divestment topic, which is around, well, like we've said, we don't want you to spend your money. Now let's think about where it should be spent. Arguments around divestment. I mean, the debate piece was interesting last week. They outed themselves on social media, so I might as well do it, between Russell and Adam. But I think they went into a kind of like Marxist constructivism sort of thing, so I'm not going to go into philosophy about this. But I mean, the class argument about divestment is always interesting. I think about who are the people that lose out. I suppose if you think about the Northeast, and that becomes quite raw at the moment. But I guess the economically sustainable arguments about I know that they'll touch upon that around the fact that that essentially this idea of a carbon bubble that causes a dropping through the floor, all that sort of stuff. That actually it's probably financially more secure to move into renewables. But I think that one of the points where this debate will come in, or there are two debates. I think one is basically about engagement, and so whether you engage with fossil fuel companies or not. So constructive engagement versus their divestment or boycott. And the other one is a much more fundamental one, I think, and much more close to home. If you about students, civil engineering students, I don't want to typecast everyone, but let's go for it. Of economics, who might look at their careers in future about trading, about fuel, then some of the disagreement or some of the debate will come from that part about divestment versus engagement. And certainly that's where I would encourage you to explore with your own campuses, like the views of those students, so you can try and get a sense of how to an approach to fossil fuel divestment. How do you I don't want to put that meme out there, but what's it like as part of the curriculum for the students? What are people's reasons for working in those industries? and it's probably more sustainable through the curriculum. The other angle on this that spoke to me about before, that might come up actually, think about it, is I suppose is the TTIP impact on divestment. Think about TTIP as a kind of contract by government to sort of not boycott certain entities. If you think about carbon tax or targets and stuff like that for nation, and they're essentially if a state were to sort of something that we're not in the benefit of a large, global corporation, then that corporation could sue a government, which is probably fine for massive countries like the US and economic like the UK and China and stuff. But what does it say for the rest of the world? And you get that classic argument like if we cut our carbon by 5%, what about China, or what about Russia, or whatever?
I think with regards to TTIP, our worry here at Suckensit is that the topic might not actually come up because TTIP is an incredibly complex piece of legislation. It's not passed and it's largely secret, and it affects everything. It's something that we're hoping to actually maybe raise more awareness about and say that no matter what we do and campaign for with regards to divestment, that could all end within 24 hours if TTIP passes. So I think for us, we're trying to see if we can start to bring in this idea that TTIP could destroy years and years of work on divestment in one quick move. So we want students to be mobilized to understand this intercut and the cross-section of what happens if you don't look at what TTIP could do. It's basically almost like you're calculating the risk around your divestment intervention. So I think for us, we want to introduce TTIP. It's complicated, but we want to show you exactly the connection between that and our plans with regards to fossil fuel divestment specifically.
Cool. And could you maybe tell us something about the prisoner education theme?
Yes. So for this year, we're going to be looking at prisoner education, and specifically, we're going to be looking at the welfare of prisoners who are trying to access or are accessing the education system. Across the years, we've heard some statements. One of them was a few years ago where Michael Gove had said that he didn't want books in prisons. So it's up to us as students to be able to help reinforce and build up the prisoner education system. As it stands, prisoners who are in education are not part of unions, and various times they're unable to complete their studies and are offered absolutely no protection whatsoever under the current system. So I think for us here, what we're trying to get out of this is introduce the issues around prisoner education, show the benefits of prisoner education with regard to society at large and the people who are in the system, all the stakeholders involved. We've got a few unions around the country that are actually doing a lot of work around prisoner education. UCU comes to mind straight away, and they're looking at it from angles such as the privatization of education, which is being implemented firstly in prisons. That's because the students do not have any protection whatsoever. So what we at the NUS do to protect prisoners, to protect our education, and also to increase and widen participation. With regards to debates that might come up, I think one thing that's of interest to us is universities are set up, at a local level, we could all do something. In certain degrees, for example, law, we have it where if you have a criminal record, you could not do that course. One university is creating barriers to entry for prisoners. We understand we will have a conflict between guaranteeing safe spaces for people as well as bringing in people who might, in quotations again, this is not a truth to be a threat or bring changes towards enforcing the safe space. We need to marry the two in ensuring that everybody's rights are respected there and that we're not excluding people from accessing education and thus actually participating in society and further improving their lives. So really, we're going to try and see and debate with students, how do we deal with this challenge in our own institutions? Another thing that we're also going to be looking at is how we support, as student unions, people who have or who are accessing prison education and give them the legal or some protection for having their education disrupted. Because of the current legal system as it stands, prisoners are subject to certain denials of rights, whether you want to say they're fundamental human rights or not, that is taking place. So what can we do, perhaps without that much power, to still help protect these people who are one of the most vulnerable set of students in the country?
Right. Cool. a small thing then, society and citizenship, a lot of it.
Yeah, just a tiny thing, nothing big. But yeah, so it's a really challenging topic. It's something that we also as students and the NUS have a lot to learn about. We'll be looking to get most of our information for people directly involved in the prison education system, that be tutors, institutions that provide education, as well as the prisoners themselves, so that our interpretation it involves the input of people who are involved. We want this process to be participatory and very inclusive, and that's traditionally not many people in the prison education system have been given. So we really want to open a door and say, we're here to support. Please let us know how, and us as a NUS can mobilize to protect these students and also other stakeholders in the system.
So there's something about membership development as well, because if you talk about the principle of nothing about us without us, then you wouldn't have those conversations about people without having people involved.
Exactly.
So there's a side conversation about their role as members. Right. Thank you much.
Thank you very much. To see you all at the Zone conference.
Yeah. So Adam and David now, so HE and FE. Who would go first? Oh, I'm right. Okay. Adam, about the marketisation of HE. Adam, the first question is really easy. I hope you can answer it. Could you tell us about what the theme's about?
Yeah, this is really weird because I'm talking into a laptop. And,
Next.
It's a broad theme. Marketisation is something that's been going for several decades in the higher education sector, but it's certainly under this government and the previous government, it's become even more now. The point is that at the moment, the movement is kind of a kind of dualism between the idea that we should avoid everything to do with the market to try and cut the market out. There's a general consensus that the market is bad, but on the one side there's an argument that we should try not to engage with anything that's considered to be part of the marketisation agenda, things like national student survey, things like quality assurance, the research framework, all of these things are considered to be there to try and construct a market, as well as the normal things like fees and consumer rights and all of those other things. And there are those that believe that the only way that we can really challenge the market in higher education is by engaging with these particular things that are going on, to be in the room and to have the discussions and to actually the meaning of a lot of things to actually help students. So the idea that we should engage with things like a national student survey to try and encourage institutions to provide better services for students, to improve the quality assurance and the kind of improvements that have been made to that in terms of student engagement with things like with the way in which QA is now structured and things like that, to get students involved in that and to use that as a way of improving quality in higher education, doing it from a much more of a value and partnership-based model of higher education rather than seeing it as something which is driving market competition.
I think that'll be the key debate in all of this, or do you think something in particular is going to leap out?
I think that at the moment, because there is so much going on in terms of policy, the government when we have our Zone conference, the government will have launched their Green Paper.
Currently, that's later, isn't it?
The paper is going to set out a number of things which are very controversial in the student movement, things like the teaching excellence framework, things like plans for based on assessments and regulations on quality to allow private providers to come in and get public funding in the sector.
The role of HEFCE.
The role of
the
the funding
existing
council, whether or not tuition fees can be raised with inflation. All these things are highly contentious and could produce a huge issues for students, not just now but in the future. And so there are going to be debates within that theme and debates within that. But ultimately, people will tend to fall into two camps: those that want to oppose, unilaterally things that are going on; those that are against what's going on, but actually want to intervene in a different way, in a much more constructive engagement style way. And there are obviously pros and cons sides of that. That it's something that a matter you have to discuss to understand where it should position itself.
Yeah, and is that what you think that we'll be trying to and we're trying to take away from the conference?
We want to steer. I mean, because so many new things happening, it's this first time where we can really have a steer from our leadership as to where we feel we need to be in terms of when these things actually started, and there's a time frame that's quite swift really for them to be implemented. We stand and we need to know where our campaigns need to be targeting, and the particular things within what's going on, especially things like the Teaching Excellence Framework, where our priorities lie, and that's something that needs to be made with the membership. They will see things on the ground rather than us seeing things at a kind of national and a more aggregate level.
So, two things that probably relate to each other. So the first one is basically what do you think that a union could take away from the conference? But I suppose related to that is, what do they need to bring into the conference?
I think bring in an open mind to start with. I think everyone is going to have their positions on how they stand on these issues, but there needs to be an openness to the debate about not only can people be wrong and that there's more information that they can know about, they need to understand that they're very complex, and that we have to engage with that complexity. You have to come with an open mind to see things from other people's perspectives. I think that what unions can really get out of that is a better understanding of where things stand, but also where they stand as a membership body in an institution which is essentially going through fundamental changes to the way in which it's regulated, structured, and funded. And so it's important for unions to not only critically engage with their institution and that process, and critically engage with government, but also become a partner and support their institution at a difficult time.
Oh, I think, is there anything else that you want to talk about the agenda in terms of HE? For me, it's like for HE and FE, because change going on, and I know David will talk about it in a minute. There's a lot of stuff in policy dates bringing people right up to date on what's going on, because there's so much going on. And if anything alone, that the conference is worth going to for.
I think one of the things to say would be, this is not just a kind of negative agenda that we've got here that's kind of looking at all of the negatives. I'll come to that, Joe. We are going to be talking about things that are actually positives that we can take out of a change in fundamental shift or change. One of things will be looking at how we can restructure the curriculum and the way in which teaching and learning and quality is thought of in relation to access, widening participation, and in relation to equality and diversity. And one of Sarana's key campaigns is to look at things like the Black Attainment and also liberating the curriculum. Things come out of a reworking of what we think higher education looks like, and that comes from providing an alternative narrative to the marketization narrative. So those are interrelated. We will be talking about consumer rights and the kind of intervention of the Consumer Markets Authority into the sphere. There are obviously those who want that as something which is protecting students and also bringing up the minimum standards that institutions dealing with, and dealing with problems like hidden course costs that have always been an issue for students' unions, and things around variable tuition fees and some of the aggressive marketing practices that some institutions engage in. But there are also those who are very skeptical about lowering everything to a minimum standard and relying on consumer rights and relying on consumer law to basically hold up students' rights. And so it's about looking at it from a different perspective and seeing that this, in some ways it's good that there's legislation to protect students from that, but in another way, it shouldn't be the market that's dealing with it. It should be something that institutions do anyway.
But it goes back to that debate about being complicit in the market.
Exactly. And when we discuss the key theme, we will certainly be talking about the consumer rights, consumer protections, student protections agenda as part of that, to say, what is it that we want to get out of it? What is the best way of interacting with it? Do we simply engage from this debate about consumer rights, or do we actually try and take the consumer rights agenda and actually make it something better? To actually say to institutions, you should be doing this anyway, because this is what is needed for a high quality student experience.
Yeah, and some of this debate actually reflects well into the UD content as well for those that are attending both. We talk about values frames and stuff like that, where they're establishing people's motivations and what they see the worldview of being in higher or further education as working for. So, but I won't name one particular session, but and it resonates.
Yeah, and we're also looking at how it affects academics and staff in higher education. There will be a session to look at the effect that it has on students if academics as a result of marketisation are overworked, stressed out, not paid enough, and unable to do their jobs properly. It obviously has a huge impact on the quality and provision that they can give to students, and there's an element of the solidarity there between how it affects students and also how it indirectly affects them through the effects on staff as well.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, Adam.
It's all right.
We have Ed Morris from Further Education.
Finally got
Do you want a bit of drum for us, please?
background for FE, absolutely.
Oh God, that was supposed to be one. Probably should go for it. Going on. The interesting thing, if I can just say before David talks, is actually this area of FE, and if you talk about marketing in HE, or particularly you talk around maintenance grants and HE, are two of probably the biggest things that are going on this year that will transform tertiary education for the next 20 years. So, it's understated the sense that, all right, yes, so it's just about FE delegates looking at the FE sort of angle because it's as such a kind of precedent for the rest of the sector.
Yeah, and what happens in this year will have a massive effect on HE.
Yeah.
The title is Area Reviews of Further Education. Sounds quite benign and not very interesting, but in fact what this effectively is a complete reorganisation of the further education sector through and towards what was a lot of college mergers and a massive reduction in the number of colleges in the country. Currently they're in England, I should say, to be specific. Currently there are around 350 or so further education colleges, a number of sort of independent private providers. About 2 years out, will have halved, I'd expect, as a result of the process.
At least, probably.
At least, possibly more, maybe actually down by 2/3. So the government announced in the summer that every designated areas or localities will have reviews of 16 education in that area, in the move what's called larger, more specialised providers.
The one's using is regionalisation in any of this.
Yeah. This is a process that has already happened in Scotland and Wales. In Scotland, it was forced on by the government. In Wales, it happened voluntarily. All it is within the context of enormous cuts to the further education sector in the last 5 years. We've had about 40% reduction in government funds for FE. Recently, a 25% cut in the Fields budget, and a National Audit Office report that found that I think it was 1/5 of all colleges are in serious financial difficulty, expected to rise to almost half by the end of next year to be in serious financial difficulty. Yeah. So these area reviews are going to bring together 6 colleges and further education colleges, but not school sixth forms. Are going to be presented with they're expected to reorganise themselves in a way that kind of takes their provision to specialised provision and away and towards kind of the direct low level market needs, whatever they might be. So it's a massive change. The first 6 reviews have already been announced. They're taking place in Birmingham, Sheffield, Manchester, Solent, Sussex, and the Tees Valley. And we're expecting all of them to be conducted over the next 18 months.
What do you think are the policy areas that they might be concerned with? What kind of...
So in terms of the issues that we've got to think about at NUS are, firstly, travel, learn, and access to the new merged colleges. To give an example of this, the Sheffield area encompasses the entire area from Barnsley down to North Nottinghamshire. If colleges are merged and courses are available on one night within that area, someone might have to travel every day from Barnsley down to Chesterfield, which is a very long drive. and also expensive. Just outright access to any kind of education, removal of local colleges and particularly local courses available.
Which I assume therefore knocks onto the regionalisation of skill bases.
Yes.
Which will have a massive knock-on effect to HE.
It's yes, which it will, and particularly with these new colleges are expected to specialise at a high level. They will actually start. The idea is really that they start competing with the universities, particularly post-92 universities, for higher technical and vocational provision, which is what this country really needs. But the other role of colleges, the social role of colleges, is also about providing basic skills and level 2 and level 3 skills for young people. And that is going to be massively constrained and less accessible as a result of this practice. So we need to gain an understanding from the Zone Conference of how delegates, what particularly delegates think will be issued in that area.
And where do you think people might disagree?
There's, I don't to say that specialising in college is a good idea, that more specialised colleges can focus their provision to make of a higher quality. One of the main of the colleges sector over the last decade or so is that has been trying to do everything, and a sort of, many colleges are kind of average at a wide range of things rather than focusing on being very good at one or two things. And also their colleges are providing a wide range of qualifications, appeal to learners, but aren't actually of much use in the long run in terms of providing skills for local economy, or even for developing students, kind of like more broad. So there'll be some debate there about to what extent you should specialise in an institution, to what extent learners should be given choice in what subjects or skill areas they decide to take up, and to what extent it should be determined by where the employment is. So that would be one of the main debates. I think the second one will probably be around similar to what Adam was saying. I think, as always, in any US, there'll always be a debate, I think, about how we as a movement respond to this. I think this is the domination of the FE sector, really. How the appropriate way, and the right and the appropriate way for any US should respond to that. Debated and decided by the membership.
Yeah, like at what point will actually kick off?
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, we will, as NUS, be presenting our plans so far, but we'll really be looking for some kind of input into what they think we should be doing and where we need to focus our efforts.
And I suppose we touched on it a little bit, but just talking to 80 delegates, because obviously a lot of it when go to sessions, it's not a lot of doing it, but in terms of getting that across, what do you think? Are there any headline bits where HE delegates should at least be interested in what's going on? What aspects do you think of the big
I think HE delegates should firstly speak to delegates from colleges in their local area. I've doubt about how they're kind of responding to this. I think delegates should also be asking their institutions, their vice-chancellors, whether universities have considered what's going to happen to their local college provision and how it's going to affect them.
link colleges?
Especially if they've got partner colleges that are delivering HE. Universities really need to be thinking about this, and they need to be and universities might also need to be thinking about how they might better fill in the gap that would be left colleges. One of the government's rationale in a number of particular basic skills, community skills provision, civic skills provision that colleges provide, that the government really doesn't seem interested in funding any. It's this kind of big society idea that people will volunteer to do it. But if there really is no other choice, then there may be no choice, and universities, and particularly students, might have a role to play there. A classic example is perhaps ESOL, which is the speakers of other languages. We're currently campaigning against the massive cuts that have been made to this, but there's, higher education students sometimes quite like to jet off to the other side of the world in order to teach English as a foreign language. They can do it just around the corner. In this country, there are 850,000 people in Britain who need basic English language instruction, and there's a really interesting actually kind of student opportunities and student kind of volunteering, charitable giving kind of aspect of there that could into the void in the skills market. But on a more policy level, I think it's about education officers talking to their vice chancellors about how they've considered what this change is going to mean. And it will also have an impact. It might have an impact on admissions and in the long run, but that is very difficult to predict.
How they have to handle access and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right.
Just to say, I'm also running a joint session, a joint HE and FE session, which is going to be focused on employment and jobs market, which is something we need to continue the conversation in. That applies to both further higher education delegates, and it's a really, really important issue. I'm really excited to get delegates' views on what of the current young people's job market is and how you should respond to it.
Cool. Good plug. Like plugging in book.
Yeah, I love plug.
Cheers, Davis.
Thanks, Alan.
Right. Now, what I'll do is I'll just finish off in the last couple of minutes with some of the governance stuff, just so you know, so I've made sure. Elections accountability, what is happening? Bluntly, two things. The officers will report on their progress, and delegates can run for election. Now, that's not a satisfactory answer, is it? So, what does it mean? Well, I'd like to think that means that you'll consider standing for zone committee. One is different, and there's a bit more of an emphasis on some of them about being a kind of organising body. Some of them much more about let's really think of policy. They all do a bit of steer zones work, drafting policy proposals to conference, being a sounding board, advisory board to the VPs, and also challenge the VPs, consulting on campaigns and tactics, as David mentioned. Then, and on that sign of representation in terms of how we are in touch with the membership as well. I was on a committee. It was a very valuable experience in my day. The accountability, a few links in the next slide that apparently, according to Sam, I might have to put in the text in the chat box, which I will. To get about the accountability, I recommend watching videos, which will be coming out soon. We recorded them the day before yesterday. Reading the reports, which are out there. Essentially, they're about understanding the purpose of their accountability in this regard, is in how the vice presidents have responded to the mandates from the national conference. You remember I said that the story starts June, July, when they come in with manifestos and the conference basket. And so, essential to both those things. So, consider how they have acted on that. That should be in their report, and there's the opportunity to both submit questions in advance and talk to them during the conference. The ability session isn't the only point to which the officers are accountable to members. And for staff members, I guess, which is nothing to do with elections accountability, but while I'm on the topic of talking to people, for staff members, there are networking sessions, but we'll attempt to gather whatever SU staff are at any of the zones and try and work with the professional networks to talk about development, to talk about opportunities broadly across the movement to organise in that regard. Challenges, will you run? The more people that take part in the election, the healthier the democracy. Or do you have someone else who's thinking of running? Some sense of delegation. So have a talk delegations about what they think, what they believe about the topics that are on the agenda, whether there are things missing that you think should be in it. I'm not saying you can get them onto the agenda now, but you certainly can go, well, why is NUS not discussing X, Y, or Z? Those are the things, or the things that I will be thinking about where I in a union now. And of course, talk to unions. I mean, not least because of what they would just talk about HE and FE and the regional in there, but it's good talk anyway, in the words of Bob Hoskins. So talk to other unions in your region, in your group, people you like, talk to people that you don't know, you disagree with. That's what the beauty of these events are. To commit to anything until you cast your vote. So that's what I'd be doing in the next week or so. Get a sense of what you think your union or your members believe in and the questions you want to ask. This next slide here has a bunch of links, which I'll put into the chat window somehow. I don't know how, but I can send them out. So, re-officer reports, submissions in advance, stands for a zone committee. And you see, I forgot that one. So you can stand for zone committee, and FE delegates get reserved places, and they're all going to be elected. The reserved places will be elected on the Wednesday morning of FE zone. Also, FE delegates who happen to be all week can have another go, but they're called reserved places for that reason. There's an election for the NEC place, which is to sit on the actual NEC itself, and that sits there with the vice president in that zone. Look at the election rules. They're relatively simple, to be honest, but do be aware of the rules anyway, because there are deadlines and there are things you have to do, and they're not that difficult or trying. My tip is, for election, you need other unions to support you. Well, start conversations and see the positions on that zone committee positions document. I hope that this has been useful. We just thought we'd try out. If anyone's got any more questions, you can email me, alan.roberts@nus.org.uk, and hopefully I shall see you in Brentford, and it won't be raining all the time. The hotel, you should know, is like 1 minute walk from the train station, so bone and the food's excellent. So I'll see, and thanks for listening.